Braja Janaranjana Yashodananda Braja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihare Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihare Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhare Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhare Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachare Yamuna Tira Vanachare Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihare Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihare Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Srila Prabhupada ki, Grantara Śhrīmad-Bhāgavatam ki, Nitai Guru Premanande. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We're reading today from the first canto of the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, chapter 18, entitled Parikshit Cursed by a Brahmin Boy. And we're taking a look today at text number 17. Tanna param punyam asamritartam Akyanamatyat bhuta yoga nishtam Akyayananta charitopapanam Parikshitam bhagavata biramam Tanna param punyam asamritartam Akyanamatyat bhuta yoga nishtam Akyayananta charitopapanam Parikshitam bhagavata biramam Tanna param punyam asamritartam Akyanamatyat bhuta yoga nishtam Akyayananta charitopapanam Parikshitam bhagavata biramam Tanna param punyam asamritartam Akyanamatyat bhuta yoga nishtam Akyayananta charitopapanam Parikshitam bhagavatam biramam. Ladies. Tana param punyam asamritartam Akyanamatyat buddha yoga nishtam Akyayananta charitopapanam Parikshitam bhagavata biramam. Tanna parang punyam asangritartam Akyanamatyat bhuta yoga nishtam Akyayananta charitopapanam Parikshitam bhagavata biramam. Tat. Therefore, na unto us, param, supreme, punyam, purifying, asangvrita artam, as it is, hakyanam, narration, ati, very, adbhuta, wonderful, yoga nishtam, compact in bhakti yoga, hakyahi, describe, ananta, the unlimited, acharita, activities, upapanam, full of, parikshitam, spoken to Maharaj Parikshit, Bhagavata, of the pure devotees, abhiramam, particularly very dear. Translation. Thus please narrate to us the narrations of the unlimited, for they are purifying and supreme. They were spoken by Maharaj Parikshit. They were spoken to Maharaj Parikshit, and they are very dear to the pure devotees, being full of bhakti yoga. What was spoken to Maharaj Parikshit and what is very dear to the pure devotees is Śhrīmad-Bhāgavatam. Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam is mainly full of the narrations of the activities of the Supreme Unlimited, and therefore it is the science of Bhakti Yoga, or the devotional service of the Lord. Thus it is Para, or Supreme, because although it is enriched with all knowledge and religion, it is specifically enriched with the devotional service of the Lord. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Gadhamayam Dadati Swapadandikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavangscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahaganalita Shri Vishakanvitangscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavanishvare Vrishabhanu Sutadevi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanshakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shrivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Thus please narrate to us the narrations of the Unlimited, for they are purifying and supreme. They were spoken to Maharaj Parikshit, and they are very dear to the pure devotees, being full of Bhakti Yoga. The Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam is known as the Amala Puranam, the spotless Purana, spotless literature. And here we see it is described as being Param, supreme, Punyam, purifying, Adbhuta, wonderful, because it is Yoga Nishtam, compact in Bhakti Yoga. It clearly delineates the science of devotional service. We can judge our state of consciousness according to how much we are interested in the Bhagavatam. That is the amazing feature of conditioned life, that even though something is param, punyam, adbhutam, that even in that condition, sometimes difficult to concentrate. Yesterday, the class was dealing with different ways in which we can hear the different kinds of listeners that are there. And that is a fact, that it is actually a great science to be able to hear Bhagavatam. But we see that also, why is it so difficult? Because our attention it is not just willpower that directs our attention. Krishna explains clearly in the 3rd chapter of the Bhagavad Gita how it is only the fool that considers himself to be the doers of activities. In actual fact, we are being carried by the modes of material nature, and they are very overpowering. And they overpower us in many ways. They overpower us in our behavior, ultimately your whole material body, and all your instincts and everything that you have, everything that is pushing you along. The urges of hunger and thirst and anger. It is all the waves of the material modes of nature that hit us. And what can we do? A little bit we can resist, but not that much. So, the modes of nature are very powerful. And the modes of nature, they also direct our attention. Our ability to pay attention is also controlled by the modes of nature. Because one will naturally be interested in that which he thinks is in his self-interest. That is very natural, obvious. One will see that there is always more information than one can pay attention to. Like even right now in this room, there's so many colors, so many sounds, so many things. And it is always happening, but our attention is always very specific. We only pay attention to certain things that we find valuable or relevant for us. So that is the problem, is that it is this false ego. That is the actual way in which the false ego covers the conditioned being, is that he covers him with the dualities of desire and hatred. So meaning that the desire and hatred directs what we find interesting and what we don't. That is the difficulty. That is why it is difficult for us to focus our attention on Krishna. Because at the very root we have this thing, this filter within us, within the psyche, that is pushing certain things away and allowing certain things in. And it is very dangerous, very deadly, this false ego. Now what to do about it? Well, by practice, the regulated practice of devotional service, we try to hear daily. There is great humility required to be able to do that. We see in the 13th chapter of Bhagavad Gita that Krishna explains, Arjuna asks Krishna about many things within this world. What is the field? What is the knower of the field? The chapter is known as, it is a chapter detailing, one sense, Sankhya, different elements of this world. And then Krishna starts off the chapter by explaining what is knowledge. What is knowledge? And let's see if we actually have a Bhagavad Gita here. And the 13th, this is verse 13:8. Krishna explains something very amazing. Well, he first explains that in this world there is so many things. There's all the elements, there's the mind, there's the ego, fire, earth, air, all the elements that makes up the world. But then he explains, amanidvam, adambitvam, ahimsa kshantir arjavam, acharyopasanam saucham, stairyam atma vinigraha, indriyarteshu vairagyam, anahankara evacha, janma mrityu jaravyadi, dugadoshanu darshanam. And he explains in a sequence of verses, 5 verses, he explains what is knowledge. It's a little different than what we would expect. He says knowledge begins with amanitvam, humility, adambitvam, pridelessness. So these two are very much related, amanitvam and adambitvam. Because it is these two things that it punctures a little hole in the ego, wherein which knowledge can enter. So no one, if we are conditioned, it is difficult actually. To perceive the truth is very tricky, because we are covered, very thickly covered. But if there is some humility, at least for certain moments, it opens a little gap for the truth to enter in. And therefore that is the beginning of knowledge, amanitvam and adambitvam. Without knowledge and pride, if one can, to a certain extent, cultivate these qualities, it helps. Because we see, for example, to be able to consistently hear the Bhagavatam on a regular basis, one has to be humble. Because it is very painful, actually, to submit oneself to hearing if there is no desire. So how do you do that? You can only do that if you are humble. Because it means that when you accept that the reason that I might not find it interesting today is not because of the Bhagavatam, but it is because of myself. Somehow or other, I am very unfortunate. We see in the Nectar of Instruction, I think it is the 8th verse, we were just reading it recently, where Rupa Goswami explains the essential, he tries to sum up the whole science of Krishna consciousness in 11 verses. It's very tricky, actually, very amazing. If you would look at the lives of the Goswamis, it is very interesting because they were sent. Sri Gitano Mahaprabhu, he himself, he was obviously just exhibiting great love for Krishna. That was his contribution. He came into this world and he exhibited and he experienced the greatest ecstasy of love for Krishna. And he exhibited, and it was very clearly, people could see clearly, just on the basis of his experience, it generated faith in people, you see, which is the problem, because it is faith that directs our attention. People can only practice something or be interested in something if there is some faith, because in the beginning they don't have that experience. But then you see Lord Chaitanya, and he had that experience, and it was very clearly that this was something wonderful. So wonderful, in fact, that many people, when they saw his ecstasy, they concluded that it must be the Supreme Lord. No living being can have that kind of experience. And we see also even the pure devotees. We see many disciples of Prabhupada. They would also sometimes have glimpses of Prabhupada's ecstasy that they would experience. And that generates a lot of faith, because one can now see this is something extraordinary. But Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he did not write. He was not a writer. He also did not start a church. There was not at his time the church of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. There was nothing. He did not start a movement in that formal sense. He was simply dancing in the street, mostly, and then later in Jagannath Puri. But he knew that it is difficult, because some people, how will people understand how to come to this point of what exactly it is that I want to give? It is very tricky. So he then sent the Goswamis, that was their job, to go to Vrindavan, to excavate Vrindavan, but also to write, to give the systematic presentation of Krishna consciousness based on the Vedic literatures, because people still had faith in the Vedas. So therefore that's what the Goswamis did. And it took Rupa Goswami many, many years, in fact, to write the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, for example. It took, I think, about 13 or 15 years because there was no internet, there was no, all these verses, all this research. He put a lot of time and effort into finding these references, finding these verses. And if you read the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, then you'll see that's exactly what it is. It gives us the process of performing devotional service in practice, but all substantiated by scripture. Otherwise it is just, who are you? Like now you can see so many people writing. You can see, if you Google Bhagavad Gita, then you will see the Swami's commentary, But who are you? Who are you to make your commentary? What is your basis of, who are you to say that this is how it is? So even Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also said, it's not I am saying, it is, even though he is the Supreme Lord, he wanted it to be established by scripture. Because then intelligent people, they can also have faith, and not just sentimental people, but people who are critically thoughtful. They can also see, well, this is something that is systematically presented. So it took a lot of time actually for him to write these books, a lot of effort. And also many people helped him. If you read the Goswamis, many brahmanas, they would bring him verses. If they had found verses or found scriptures that were supportive of the conclusions of devotional service, they would bring it to the Goswami. So it was quite a project that was happening there. And therefore he compiled these amazing books. And one of them is then obviously this Nectar of Instruction, which is interesting because it's only 11 verses. So trying to give the science of Krishna consciousness. In one sense, it is just like technology. Like nowadays, anyone can ride a car. It's not so difficult to drive a car. You don't have to be extraordinarily intelligent or extraordinarily talented to be able to drive a car. Millions of people are doing it. But who can design a car? Very few people. And also, it is not just one person that did it. It is over many generations. A lot of intelligence going into designing this vehicle. And then but then millions of people can drive it. So similarly, the scriptures, in one sense, it is designed. So the Swamis, they compiled it, gave us this presentation. And now, even though we are not particularly talented or intelligent, we are able to use this and to, in one sense, then move forward closer to the experience that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to reveal within this world. But then in the Nectar of Instruction, only 11 verses, only a few verses, trying to sum up the essence of Krishna consciousness in as little as possible. So it's quite a feat to be able to do it in 11 verses. So one can also understand that whatever is in those 11 verses must be very important, isn't it? Because otherwise, why would you choose to put that in there? So it would be an interesting challenge for us. If you only in 500 words, you have to write down how to go from the beginning of Krishna consciousness to the end. But you only have 500 words. You will choose your words very carefully. and you'll think, should I say this or should I not say? And you become very selective of what you put in. So we can understand that that little booklet is interesting exactly because it is so short. Because there we can see that now Rupa Goswami, he was really thinking, what is the most essential things that people have to know? And what do we see in there? Yes, we see the first step, controlling the mind and senses, always understanding that without discipline and austerity, there is no question of love. Very important. One first has to understand that, otherwise one will very easily be misled. Vācavegam manasakrodavegam. Then explaining the 6 principles that are favorable to devotional service and the 6 principles that are unfavorable. So understanding that that is a fact. Certain things are good for devotional service and certain things are bad. And the devotee, it is explained that many people ask, how do I surrender? How do I surrender to Krishna? How can I surrender? Oh, it is so abstract. Recently someone told me, they asked me something and then they say, oh, but it is so abstract. No, it is not abstract. You want it to be abstract because then you have an excuse not to do it. And that's why. If you think it is intangible, it's because then it means, oh, I don't know what to do. No, it's not. It's explained that surrender means accepting what is favorable and rejecting what is unfavorable. That is surrender. When you see that you are doing something that is actually not favorable for Krishna's pleasure, to try to stop doing that. That is surrender. That is what it means in practice. And when you see there is something that can be good for your devotional service, then you have to accept it. That is also surrender. So Rupa Goswami then explains what is favorable and what is unfavorable. But and in both of these two, verse 2 and 3, he explains how that in both of these verses he explains how one should give up the association of worldly-minded people, because association is very powerful. And then in the 4th verse, then he explains how one should associate with the devotees. Because that is also important. To associate with the devotees, it is not just being with the devotee and then it becomes devotee association. We also have to activate one another, you see? 2 people can be together, they can be devotees, and they can be in Maya, or they can be Krishna conscious together. So in that way also, there is a quality of devotion that is manifested when one treats a devotee in a certain way. So therefore devotees also have to learn how to treat another devotee as a devotee. And in that way the association becomes more powerful. Otherwise it just stays on the mundane level. So therefore Rupa Goswami explains that how exactly this is done. And we see that the mechanism is service. It is by service, by devotees serving one another, that then there is the churning of Krishna consciousness. So very nice, so very important, because there is a way to associate with the devotees. Therefore he puts that verse in there. Then, in the next verse he starts to explain how to differentiate between different devotees. Because not all devotees are the same. Unfortunately, that is the reality. In the beginning, compared to average people, compared to someone who is not a devotee, all devotees are wonderful. Even someone, Lord Chaitanya said, even someone just chants the holy name once, he is worthy of our respect. So, that is the first explanation. Understand that yes, every devotee, he has to be given respect. That is the baseline consciousness of the devotees of Sri Gitano Mahaprabhu, the devotees of Lord Vishnu. The first level is respect. Nothing under respect. And not just respect, we see in the Chaitanya Bhagavat that Lord Chaitanya said that even if you mistreat any living being is ultimately is a devotee. And if you are mistreating any living being even, then you will not be able to become a devotee. So respect is the baseline of consciousness that the devotee can show towards others. But then there's also differentiation, because unfortunately, not all people are on the same level. That is also just the reality that one has to understand. Not just Prabhupada says in one purport in the first canto, he says, the foolish, the harmful and the passionate can never be devotees of the Lord, even how much they try to advertise themselves as devotees by external dress. So therefore we understand that devotion is ultimately not a designation. To be a devotee is not about assuming some kind of identity or some kind of image or becoming a member of some institution. To be a devotee is a certain state of consciousness that the person adopts. And to the extent, and not everybody is able to adopt this to the same extent. And we also ourselves, once you start to practice devotional service, you see, well, it's not so easy. Sometimes I am a devotee and sometimes I am not. It's unfortunate, because that's what it means. We are practicing devotees. That's what it means. It means that sometimes you succeed in being a devotee, but most of the times we don't. That's just the reality. So therefore, bhakta abhas, a shadow of a devotee, a reflection of a devotee. So by the mercy of other devotees, he is trying to be one, but he is not in fact already a full devotee. Pure devotee means not just elevated, it means only a devotee. That's also what pure. If you say pure gold, it just doesn't mean a kind of gold, it means it is only gold. It's not mixed with anything else. So similarly, a pure devotee just means someone who is only a devotee. He is not anything else. There's nothing else in there. He is just a devotee. So, but to be a devotee is very wonderful. But to be a pure devotee, to be only a devotee, that is very amazing. So most of us are not pure devotees. We are mixed devotees. So mixed with other things as well, other desires that are also in there. So therefore Rupa Goswami explains, yes, you have to differentiate how you associate with devotees based on the level of purity of the devotee. So to those people who are simply who chant the holy name or engage, but one can see that perhaps not manifesting all the full qualities, because still mixed with many other things. To these people, we offer obeisances in our mind. We stay respectful towards them. To those people that we see who are sincerely trying to execute the desires of the spiritual master, even though they might not be pure, they might still be hampered by so many afflictions, so many things, but practically we can see that they are personally endeavoring to work very hard in Krishna's service. These people, we should become friends with them. We should seek their association and we should bow down to them. We should offer them serious respect, because regardless of their external qualities or even their failures, even their mistakes or their flaws, due to their purposefully endeavoring, we can understand that these people are special. They are special because they have taken up that responsibility in devotional service. And from Krishna's perspective, that is what counts. But then that devotee who is completely freed from the tendency to criticize others, that pure devotee, the Uttama Adhikari, who has also internally achieved a high level of development, to that person you should surrender your life. To that person you should take his desires or her desires. You should take that and make that your own desire. So, but it is reserved for that special person, for the spiritual master, that we should seek out. These people are very special, and to them we should surrender fully, not just bowing down or offering obeisances, but actually taking their desires very seriously, which is also a very difficult thing to do. But then Rupa Goswami, he continues. So now he's explaining, and he continues to explain how it is important to be able to understand what does it mean, and to not mistakenly assess a pure devotee or a devotee's external failings or impurities or bodily defects, and not be disturbed by these things. Just like the Ganges is fully pure, even though there might be impurities floating on the substance. So therefore one has to be careful, because it is not just external impurity, but it can also mean certain personality traits that people have. We're all born with a certain personality. And some people's personality, it works very well with your personality. It is a mundane calculation. Just like some people look very beautiful to you. We all have our taste in people. Some people you go, oh, this person is actually very beautiful. Someone else looks at that same person and say, no, it's not very that beautiful. I don't like people like that. Similarly, people's personalities. Some people, they admire people who are very pushy. If you're a very pushy, ambitious person by nature, then you work well with that energy. Other people, they are afraid of that because they don't like that energy. But these things are all external. It is just specifics of personalities, and one has to be careful not to judge a person's spiritual qualification based on just these external things. I once asked my spiritual master, because we understand that the spiritual master has to, there is love. We understand that principle of love. But then I asked him, is it important for the spiritual master to like the disciple? Which is something very different. You see, you can love someone and not actually like them if one is elevated as a personality. Because you like some people and you don't, And because I was thinking about this, how important is it for my spiritual master to like me? Because sometimes I see that he doesn't like what I do or how I do things. He doesn't always like it. What can we say? Because we are different. So it was an interesting question. And then he said, well, that means the false egos. This means sometimes, and that's how you go also. So sometimes you just meet these people, and your false egos, they work very well together. This person's conditioning, it works, and then one can have friendship. But that is mundane, because even mundane people, they can have friendships like that. They also have people that they like, and then it works. So one has to be careful as a devotee, not to then judge a person's spiritual stature according to whether you like them or not. And that is very austere, but that is the austerity in devotional service, that you have to be able to differentiate between your own likes and dislikes and between Krishna's likes and dislikes. Because Krishna, he doesn't care about the external, just like he doesn't care about the body. He's also not necessarily that concerned about superficial parts of a person's personality. It's not what ultimately conquers his heart. And we see also sometimes devotees that can be very difficult people, but they're actually very, very nice. They're actually very wonderful. If one has the vision to be able to appreciate that. But it takes a little while to appreciate that. So therefore Rupa Goswami puts that also in there, because it is important. Because our ability to properly deal with the devotees, he puts at least 4 verses in there dealing with this one point, because that is the crux of the matter. But then we see that he puts another verse in there, very interesting, where he explains the jaundice, the jaundice principle, that just like a person that is afflicted by jaundice, he has no taste for sugar. Sugar tastes bitter. So in that way, a person who is afflicted by avidya, for him the holy name tastes very bitter. So we see that is a very important principle in spiritual life, that the bitter taste that we sometimes have when we engage in the regulated practice of Krishna consciousness is due to our own liver disease. That is the fact. But one has to be very humble to be able to digest that. Very humble to accept that fact. So here we also see Bhagavatam, Param Punyam Adbhuta, so very supreme, very wonderful, and very purifying. So on the basis of that faith, the regulated hearing of the Bhagavatam happens. And then we see that once we regularly engage in Bhagavatam, every now and again we are fortunate, isn't it? Every now and again we are fortunate to be hit by the wonderful nature of the Bhagavatam. Because that's what we see in the case of pure devotees. Why is the Bhagavatam so wonderful? Because the Bhagavatam, it has the capacity, if one properly approaches it, it has the capacity to completely enchant us, completely capture the attention, more than anything else. The living being comes into this world to perform his own pastimes. That is what this place is for. But then we see the problem with our own pastimes is, it goes horribly wrong, at worst, or it is at best very boring. It is boring. It is fascinating to see how even the most famous people in this world, they're also interested in gossip. They're also interested in other people's lives, because ultimately one's own pastimes are not that entertaining. But the Bhagavatam, because it is the narrations of the Supreme, the Param, it is possible to completely enchant the heart. And we see, for example, Maharaj Parikshit. But now, how to come to this point of enchantment? We have to understand that also Krishna will help us. Krishna helps us. And that is actually what Krishna is doing. And all the events in our life, it has to be understood that when we say Krishna loves us and Krishna is helping us in our spiritual path, we have to understand that his only desire and his criteria of success and his prerogative is to bring us to the point that we can become more absorbed in his message and in his name. That is his gift. And that is and whatever he does to us, it is meant to facilitate that. But these things can take a variety of forms that he can do in order to do that. Like we're saying, ultimately, to increase our humility is very wonderful, because then our knowledge increases. But sometimes we have certain experiences that make us humble, that might not be so pleasant. But then we have to understand that, yes, Krishna is seeing the bigger picture. We see, for example, Maharaj Parikshit himself, a crisis that hit him and that enabled him to listen to the Bhagavatam with great attention. And then there's one, as we see, we'll go later to this in this pastime, in this chapter actually, we see that apparently Maharaj Parikshit, he became overwhelmed by thirst. And then he became very irritated. And therefore, that was what pushed him to put the dead snake over the head of the Rishi. But then Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur in the purport, he explains that do not be fooled. Do not think that Maharaj Parikshit was somehow overwhelmed by the material energy. He says, no, this was Krishna's arrangement. Special arrangement, some or other. At that moment, Krishna covered him. And therefore, he put him in that situation. And what is the proof? He says, what is the proof? What is the proof? The proof is that if he was so thirsty, he cannot have been mundanely not able to conquer that thirst. Because after he put that dead snake over the king's head, over the sage's head, then he left and he immediately started to feel remorse. Immediately started to feel bad. What had he done? How did he do that? He couldn't understand how he did that. And then what happened is then before he could take water again, before he could drink, because he was still in the forest, there was no water there, he left. Before he could drink anything, news came to him that the sage's son had cursed him. And then he immediately left for the Ganges to fast until death. So he actually never even drank water again after putting the garland over the Rishi's head. So we see even at that point, then he immediately gave up drinking and eating to give his full attention to the Bhagavatam. So that is the proof that he was not an ordinary person, a mundane person that was still subjected to the influence of hunger and desire and thirst, because we see he manifested great self-control. And it is that kind of enchantment in the Bhagavatam that ultimately will be our savior, to come to that point, to be able to be so absorbed in this message that we can forget that which is not essential. But that takes some practice, and therefore Nityam Bhagavata Sevya. So very wonderful to those people who are daily trying to hear this Bhagavatam some way or another, because by simply continuing to give this oral reception to the message of the Bhagavatam, it will grow. And then also the various things that happen in our life, then immediately these things become helpful in our devotional service, pushing us forward, closer to Krishna, if we keep that connection with the Bhagavatam. So in any case, let us hear if there are any questions or any comments on anything that has been said today. Yes, Divyangi Mataji.
I like the point. Thank you so much for the class. I like the point you said about that we actually have to activate people in our association.
Yes.
We even feel different when we kind of just come together with anybody and we just talk about mundane things.
Yeah.
Or if you really, somebody activates you,
Mm.
like some people are just really amazing, and they just go into this Bhagavatam and you have no choice.
Yeah.
And the quality of association becomes much higher, and you feel it afterwards. So much impact, so much. And when you didn't discuss who dance, different kind of
Yeah.
things. But if it's needed, it will come to you.
Yeah.
And one thing I wanted to say, my Guru Maharaj likes to say that even when we distribute books, right, we have to, like everyone is looking for something in it for them, right?
Mm.
The same with everything, how we get attracted to things. We feel that for some reason we need it. It will make me happier, more beautiful, or whatever, right? We're looking for this kind of thing. That what is it in this for me?
Mm.
Right? And the same I'm thinking we have to do with Bhagavatam. I believe someone told in lecture it might be you a few weeks ago that Bhagavatam is full of stories. And while we're reading it, right, we can really kind of relate to the stories. And you read, for example, one story, and then not really, it's not my mood, right?
Yeah.
Then you read another one, and then you have to find this story for yourself, what you really relate to it, and then you will be attracted more.
Yeah.
That's what I use in a practical.
Yeah. this like medicine for all the various kinds of situations that we can find ourselves in. And therefore it is important to, I know one strategy that I have of reading Bhagavatam, what he does is, he reads the Bhagavatam, he has 2 bookmarks. So one bookmark that he has is when he reads everything. He starts from the beginning and he reads the verses and the purports, everything, just step by step. But then he has another bookmark where he reads 1 chapter a day, just the verses, just so you can keep contact with the actual story of Bhagavatam and also become familiar with all the various things that are happening in there. So I found that is a nice strategy to actually, because there's quite so many stories. There's a few famous stories that everybody knows about, but then there's many stories, and even you will see that if you read the stories yourself, if you read the actual verses yourself, it's some things that you didn't know, really, some details that always come up. So in that way, nice to have as we become familiar with all the various things that are happening in the Bhagavatam, we become also empowered to know what is there, what is in there, and then to know what it is that we are interested in reading now. And I know that my own spiritual master also, it is important to follow our own interest also when we read Bhagavatam. So when we have a desire, if you think, today actually I'm really interested, I want to read the story about Dhruva, somehow or other, then we should go for it. If there is an interest, to follow our interest in reading the Bhagavatam is very important, because why not? If there's an interest, then it is a great valuable thing that somehow or other you have now some interest in reading. And it can be very nice to then follow that and then get the specific medicine that we need. Thank you very much for your comment, Maharaji. Anything else? Yes, Elena.
What do you mean exactly when you speak about activating somebody? What is this process?
What is the process? It means that, so the principle is that people respond to us how we approach them. Because Krishna himself is also like that. Ye yata mang prapadyante tang staiva baljamyaham mama vartnana vartante manusya partha sarvasa. So Krishna says that however you approach me, there I will reveal myself accordingly. And people are also, because we are like Krishna, we are reflections of Krishna, so we are also like that. Meaning that if you will come to someone, and you will see this, if you go to someone and you immediately you become very angry at them and you start yelling and screaming at them, then you will get a certain reaction from that person. It is natural. That's just how it goes. And that is the reality actually with people. Even though we think so much of people, we think people are the problem. We think people are the problem. But the reality is that we are the problem. In terms of we get from people, we elicit something from people by how we approach them. So you see some people, for example, they have problems with everyone. Amazing. I know some of these people. They have problems with everyone, with authority, with everyone, and you will see them on Facebook, very vocal. And many times these people become devotees also, because they cannot fit into normal society, and then they become devotees. And then for a while it goes well, but then it all goes to hell, because then even in devotee society, they're fighting with everyone. And they have these lists of why, all the problems that they have with people. And what is interesting with these people that is they are convinced, they are able to understand it. It is they themselves who are eliciting this reaction from other people, because some or other, they treat people, because they push people in a certain way, then they get a certain response. So when one becomes a cultured person, like a mundane cultured person, one has the ability to treat people properly, so that you don't activate the worst side of people, you don't bring the worst out of people, you don't activate people's, because everybody is filled with anger and envy and jealousy and pride. It is within us. So then you learn in a cultured way to treat the people, so you don't bring that out. Why would you do that? Why would you bring out the bad qualities in people? So that's what it means to become a cultured person. So when cultured people are together, that's when it is nice, because the bad qualities are kept at bay. But we know that ultimately it is still there, it's still mundane. So it's nice if you become polite in that way, and then you become a polite person, and then most of your dealings will be polite, and people will treat you nicely because you treat them nicely. But it is not spiritual, you see. Spirituality then, a devotee, there's this added layer that a devotee does, is that he does not just treat people nicely. He doesn't just, not only like that, he treats other people as devotees, you see. When you treat another person as a devotee, then you will bring forth the devotee within them. and to be able to see other people as devotees and to treat them as devotees. And the easiest way to do that is according to the principles that Rupa Goswami elucidates. We see, for example, if you understand that the real benefit is Krishna consciousness, then try to treat people in a way to help them become more Krishna conscious. So whatever we are doing, even with senior people, it's the same principle is there. Say, if you come to a Bhagavatam class, for example, you are serving the Bhagavatam, but you are also serving the speaker of the Bhagavatam. Because you are here, you give the opportunity to the speaker to speak Bhagavatam. And then the roles are reversed. Then the next day, the other person has the opportunity to speak, and then we come and we listen. And in that way, it is all service. It is never just, you are also serving the other individual. So even in that way, it is by serving the person, treating them as a devotee. So similarly, when it comes with our peers also, for example, if you gossip with a person, if you go to a person and you gossip, then you are not treating them as a devotee. Because as a devotee, this is not to their benefit. So why would you then, now by what you are saying, you are pushing this person into another state of consciousness. Now you're bringing that person to the level of gossip and whatever it is, complaints. But you are doing that person a disservice, because now you are adding an extra burden to their consciousness. And if it is a junior person, you bring them down, but even if it is a senior person, to even someone who is perhaps spiritually advanced, why would one do that? We see that there's one book by Prabhupada called Brothers, and then he says how if one approaches the spiritual master, you have to take your own bed and bedding. Meaning that the actual mature relationship of the disciple to the spiritual master is that when the disciple does not approach the spiritual master so that the spiritual master can solve his problems. That is, an immature disciple does that. Just like an immature devotee, he approaches God as God is the one that should solve his problems. The mature disciple, he takes responsibility for his own life, and he approaches the spiritual master, and he approaches the Supreme Lord asking, how can I help? What can I do for you? So in that way we see maturity. So similarly also when we treat other people, to see how can I contribute? How can I assist this person in their Krishna consciousness by my associating with them? And then there's various ways to do that. But the basic principle, some or other, how can we be Krishna conscious together? How can I do something that makes us both Krishna conscious? And in that way we activate the devotee in a person. Because the same people, some people, for example, and it's not, everybody has a predilection, for example, towards gossip. This is what we do. It's very natural, So it means that it's not the responsibility that is on the other person. But that same person, they also have an attachment to hearing about Krishna. So we can decide what we want to activate when we deal with people. We can decide on what level we want to associate with people, according to the desire that we bring into the association. So in that way, and then we will get that. Then we will also, if I am able to treat other people as devotees and somehow in my interactions leave people in a better state than they were before, then I will also be greatly benefited, because then my interactions with people will also be enhancing my own Krishna consciousness. So in that way, it is interesting that we get ultimately what we deserve, how we react with people. And specifically in the conditioned state. Therefore the pure devotees are very nice, because they can only be devotees. Even if you come to them with a bad state of mind, and even if you come to them with bad desires and complaints and all these things, they are unaffected. They don't go to that level. So therefore, seek out these people's association very urgently, because even if you yourself are completely unqualified and completely on a lower state of consciousness, just by being in their association, they will just lift you up. They will lift you up. So very wonderful, these people. But not everybody is like that, because some of us are not that spiritually powerful, and some of us are also spiritually struggling. So therefore, when we are together, we can also help one another. We can help one another. It's not that everybody, all devotees are that powerful. Some people get pulled down. If you go to them with a bad state of consciousness, then you will influence their Krishna consciousness. So therefore, with our friends and with our peers in Krishna consciousness, we have to make an effort together to be Krishna conscious, because we all have to try together. Otherwise, if one person has a negative mentality, everybody will get pulled down. Not that everybody is pure devotees who can just stay aloof above that energy. So in that way, we have to understand that even what we do to ourselves, it influences everyone. And so to learn the art of bringing forth the devotional spirit in other people is actually very nice. And if you will see that is why this, for those who are training other people, you will see that devotees who have the responsibility. Preaching is very interesting because the beginning of preaching is very nice. It's like Harinam, book distribution, these things are wonderful because it's first contact and it's very magical. And it's like, poof, very exciting. But then the reality when that people come, you give them a book, and then they come and they say, okay, but now I want to surrender. I've read this book and I find it very interesting. And now I want to surrender. Now you have to take responsibility for me. Now you have to give me devotional service and you have to train me and you have to educate me. That becomes very austere, very difficult. So we see the devotees who have the ability to train people, to take care of them, then they have to become very expert. Because now they have to take these people and somehow or other draw forth Krishna consciousness from people. Because it is there, but there's a lot of other stuff also. So Prabhupada says that the expert transcendentalist, or he says that the expert transcendentalist, he is always making plans. This is in a letter that he writes to Karandar, where it is a very interesting letter because at that time in ISKCON, they had this big plan to centralize the whole of ISKCON. So ISKCON is very interesting how Prabhupada set it up, because even though we have a governing body in one sense, but all ISKCON centers are individually registered entities. So legally they're separate. So completely separate. Like this ISKCON and that ISKCON is in actual fact two different entities. Completely separately registered, completely financially independent, and once it's completely separate. But GBC is there as an oversight body, so ecclesiastical body. So it's very genius because that saved ISKCON. Because in the 80s when ISKCON had all these many legal issues and stuff, it's only individual temples that went down. Not like the Catholic Church, for example, which is a centralized entity. So it's one entity, and all the money that is gathered by all the different temples, it goes to one central source, and then it distributes it to the different churches. So most church organizations are like that. They have centralized bodies that govern how funds are distributed, and all the money comes in and it goes there, and then it is redistributed. But then these entities, they get hit by legal cases, because if one person does a big problem, then you are sued. Then it means if you win a $10 million lawsuit, then the church has to pay. Whereas in ISKCON, if you lose a $10 million lawsuit, but your temple only has $400 in the bank account, then what can you do? One temple goes down, but the rest of the institution is saved. So that was one genius how Prabhupada set it up. So they had this plan to centralize the whole of ISKCON, and Prabhupada writes a very nice letter, very interesting, because in there things come up that's not just about management, but about the spirit of what it really means to make Krishna conscious communities and societies. And therein he writes, he says that the real thing is to somehow draw forth the devotional spirit within the individual. It is not by management or by money or all these things. That is not going to help. It is about one person trying to draw forth the voluntarily desire to sacrifice something for Krishna, some of your energy and your spirit for Krishna. So in that way, that is what we are all doing to one another ultimately. We are drawing forth certain things from one another and how we engage with one another. And that is why association is so powerful. And that is why your destiny is ultimately shaped by who you are spending your time with, because people will draw something from you. And we would oftentimes hear that people would say that just by being in their association, you would feel like a devotee, because the pure devotee, he sees you as a devotee. And therefore you also become a devotee. So all of us, we practice that, and we can be very kind to one another in that way if we try and treat one another as devotees and bring forth according to our ability. But it starts with our own absorption in Krishna consciousness, because naturally what comes out in our association is what we ourselves are deeply absorbed in. And if we ourselves are deeply absorbed in Krishna's instructions, in Krishna's message, then it is much easier for it to come out when you deal with other people to bring that out. So in any case, a few thoughts on activating other people. Let's see if we can activate one another over breakfast. Grantaras Śhrīmad-Bhāgavatam ki, Śrīla Prabhupada ki, Go Premanande.
が